Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the May 2021 SAM Sibs Stick Together webinar. We are very thrilled to include Janet Estervig on this month's webinar to talk about transition issues. So there is probably no one, well, I eat my words, but in my opinion, no one better to kind of talk about the ABCs of transition, which is what this webinar or this meeting is, because you guys are all part of the meeting and you can see each other and chat with each other. She has degrees in special education and vocational rehab. She's a registered nurse. She was the Employment Initiative section chief at the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. She now works at the Attainment Company that provides educational curricula, assistive technology, and professional trainings for schools and adult service providers who serve youth for people with disabilities. So she knows everything there is to know about what you need to know about preparing for transition. And so I know some parents and also some older siblings, which constitutes a lot of our SIB panel, are getting older and want to know the basics, don't feel like they can quite yet go to law school to learn about legal rights yet, but at least want to get started with some of the basics. And so Janet is going to give us a bit of those basics, and then our SIB panel is going to comment. So I'm going to go ahead and let Janet take it away. You should be able to share your screen.
Thank you. And I am really happy to be here. And we are going to do the top 10 list of transition, high school and beyond. So you've already introduced me, and I do have an eclectic background, very interesting. And I'm actually a registered nurse, and I got to be that because I was job coaching someone who went on a ventilator and had to have nursing staff. So I went back to technical college, got my degree as a registered nurse so I could be his job coach. So you never know where life will lead you. I graduated that at 50 years old. So even though you're starting out, all of you youngsters starting out now, you never know where life is going to lead. So you have transitioned or are transitioning. And that's really what I want to talk about. Is that there is a process of transitioning from high school into the world, the adult world. And we're going to talk about what I think are the top 10 lists. So first of all, you have to plan. There's some transition planning going on. You have to prepare. There's really important skills you need in order to be able to live, work, and recreate in your community. You need to talk about guardianship at 18 years old, what's happening. And I'll just have some brief information about that. And there are some amazing federal laws that have been passed over the years. One is IDEA, HCBS, WIOA, ADA, blah, 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 blah. There's so many acronyms, but I'm going to tell you some of those. And then there's state laws and policies that really support community living. And that's really what we're going to talk about is the transition into the community. Social Security benefits, that could take another whole training by itself. Mm-hmm. And then the adult service system, about employment, about supported living, community connections. And in the end, the top list of all of this is we want people to have meaningful days, meaningful lives in their communities, participating and being a part of those communities. That's really what transition is all about, from school into the world of living. I guess we can say the adult world. So let's talk about each one. So transition. First of all, there's another whole list of vocabulary. So when I went to nursing school, I had to learn another list of vocabulary, words I had never heard of before, not just words, but acronyms. Then I went to the state of Wisconsin and worked in their Department of Health Services. Honestly, I started writing down things. They were saying all this stuff, and I thought, what are they talking about? So I'm sharing with you some of the 4 top letters that you may already know. The IEP, of course, that's really when they're in school. You'll never use that word again once they graduate from high school. But the IEP is really those goals of writing that out. And there is laws that say that IEP has to, by 14 years old, has to start talking about transition goals. If there hasn't been discussion about transition goals, then it's important to have those. Then you go into, if you're looking at employment, which I believe everybody can work, and I think it's important that everybody works. So IPE, so it's an IEP goes into an IPE, and that's called an individualized plan for employment. Vocational rehabilitation uses this acronym, and that's planning about what are you going to do for a job, and what's the next steps we have to go through for planning for employment. Then you're going to work up to the PCP or an ISP, and that's person-centered planning, which is really looking at how do we plan for that person, not about what services are available, because of course you have to think about and look at that, but we don't want to talk about services. We want to talk about the person. What is it that they're looking for in their lives? And how do we plan around the person? Person-centered planning. And the federal law requires that if somebody is in long-term care and adult service system, they must have a person-centered plan. Now, some people may go into other areas, like in some agencies may use the ISP model, but especially in the mental health world, they're probably going to use that term, individual service plan. But whatever all of these are, it's really just talking about helping a person think about their lives and what support systems are they going to need to just live a life, just like you and I. But it is a little different, because there may be a need for some supports. So while this person is still in school, this is really important times to prepare to live, work, and recreate in their community. And this is really where I talk about the importance of making connections at the school level, having conversations about those required transition goals, and what type of skills should that person be learning. Now, I do understand that some people in school, and especially if we're talking about individuals with autism, they may be very academically oriented. So a lot of their high school might be academics. So it might be hard to build all of these skills into an academic curriculum. But you still, even if you know all the capitals of every state, or if you know the population of every state, all of that is interesting, but you have to know how to communicate, how to cook, how to budget, how to use money, how to keep your house. What are safety skills you need to have? How do you shop for groceries? How do you set up appointments? And how do you use transportation? You can be a doctorate in a college, and still you got to know these things in order to live on your own or live in a supported situation. You also need to know that you have to have a job. And I, again, believe everybody can work. And yes, you can work and still get your Social Security benefits, because that might be important for someone because of Medicaid. They get their services through Medicaid. So, but employment, always promoting employment. And one of the first things you need, and employers are begging for actually, is that the workers that are coming in have soft skills. So teaching soft skills. Personal hygiene. Yes, you do have to smell good when you go to work. Well, in school too. Timeliness. What does it mean to work as a team? Most jobs require some level of teamwork. How do you problem solve? What are some social skills? What's the distance you have to stay when you're talking to people? Other social skills like can you just walk in on an office setting to the CEO and say good morning, and if their door is shut? Well, there are some unwritten rules. Actually, there are a lot of unwritten rules in social skills. So teaching and learning those, having that work ethic, being flexible in a job, those are all things, those are all soft skills that can be taught, and it's important to be in transition skills. Then in employment, it's so important that students, especially when they're still in school, and some may be already out of school, doesn't matter if they're in any kind of employment program, what are they doing? Let's do job shadowing. What is that job like? What are some work experiences, internships, actually starting to get part-time jobs? They have found that if a high school student has at least 2 work experiences while they're in school, they are 5 times more likely to be employed post high school. So it is statistically important that you get some of these work experiences. And so it's important for students to understand, okay, if I'm going out into the world of work and I'm going to job shadow, I have to know what it takes, what education I'm going to be needing for a job, what are the physical skills I need for that job. You know, we get people who say, I'm going to be an airline pilot. Well, great, maybe you can be, but do you know what it takes to be an airline pilot? Let's research it. Let's look on this. What do you physically have to do? How many hours do you have to fly in order to ever be considered for an airline pilot? What education is required? So it's all about that, and then actually job shadowing somebody. And then the third thing is recreation. What is some sports you'd like to learn how to do once you're out of school? What are the things that is there softball teams, baseball teams, kickball teams we have around here, frisbee that people are throwing around? I mean, what are some sports that people could participate in? Special Olympics. I love Special Olympics, and that's great for some people. Health and fitness. What are people doing once they're out of school? They're going to fitness centers or maybe going to classes. Maybe they're part of their community in some way, going to the library, theater, clubs. How do you access the community? What are some transportation skills you need to access it? How do you ask somebody to come along with you to go on it? So these are critical transition skills. And if the schools aren't teaching them, maybe because you're doing more academics and maybe there isn't classes on these, or if they are in special education classes, make sure these skills are being taught, because you know what? All siblings need them as well. There's nothing on this list that would say I'm talking about someone with a disability. So except that maybe you're not going to get it through osmosis. So now, guardianship. What about guardianship? So this could be, again, a whole training. So guardianship requires court action. Just so you know, when you turn 18, you become, it doesn't matter if you have a cognitive disability or any type of disability, you are your own guardian at 18. There's nobody that's your guardian. You have to go to court. Just because a parent thinks they're the guardian, they aren't. You have to go to court to become a legal guardian once a person turns 18. Now, you do have to find out what the guardianship laws are in each state, but here's the typical types of guardians: parent or family, a court-appointed guardian. These are usually called corporate guardianship. A volunteer guardian, that's me. I volunteered to be a guardian for somebody I know. And then there's two types of guardianship. So let's look at each one. So the parent, typically you're going to want to get guardianship if somebody needs informed consent for like healthcare. Maybe they need it because they're unable to manage their affairs because of their disability. But it does result in a loss of independence, typically, because the guardian can make decisions because they have that legal responsibility, but it is not automatic. You have to go through the court process. A corporate guardian is maybe there isn't any family, or families unable to be guardians. Then there may be a bank, a trust, a nonprofit entity that takes over guardianship. Now, they'll often get some type of compensation for that. They could even live in another state. And usually they don't know the person very well. And agencies that I've worked with have worked with corporate guardians. Sometimes it's fine, and sometimes it's a challenge. There are volunteer guardians like me. I knew Alex for years and years. I knew his family. And once I was no longer a service provider providing employment services for him, they said, Janet, would you be willing to be his guardian? His family's moving away. So I'm just a volunteer guardian. And we try to find ways for people to make those connections. And usually it's people who may already know that person and also know the system. And there's full and limited guardianship. Full means all the financial resources, and limited might be just for some specific areas of maybe the services for that person. So again, another whole training on guardianship, but just so you understand, at 18, the person's their own guardian, and that might be just fine. Maybe they just need a little support. Maybe they just need a power of attorney for healthcare. There might be just things like that. So these are the federal laws you should know. And I didn't give you web links because I figured that you could just Google them, because these are really important laws. IDEA, of course, that began in 1975 when I was just going to college. And I was learning about the importance of IDEA and then went into special ed. It has been amended in 2015 and 2004. They added all those laws about transition planning. This IDEA is only for when they're in school. It is an entitlement program. Once they're done with school, that entitlement is kind of gone. So not kind of, it's pretty gone. So then they can be put on waiting lists. So then they go into, if they're even eligible for adult service system, they're going into home and community-based services. This is what Medicaid funds, is people's supports. And there's lots happening under the HCBS system. The federal law has changed on this now, and they're saying, if you're having large groups of people together, either living or working in facilities, we don't want that anymore because you can't use our HCBS money for that. We want you to be using it for people to be in their community. So that's what Medicaid funds, is all those services. WIOA was an amazing law that said, hey, we want everybody working. So that whole WRC, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, you all know about ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. We just had our 20th anniversary of that. And that's really interesting too, to read about how reasonable accommodations. But WIOA is really where I want to focus right now, just quickly. And WIOA is really about students while they're still in school. It's a law. It actually is a huge law. It covers a lot of area on our workforce in the United States. One portion of it is on vocational rehabilitation. So it's requiring that anybody who's currently going into a sheltered workshop or a facility-based, what we call facility-based pre-vocational services, anyone in those settings, we're saying, okay, under WIOA, we have to offer everybody in there an opportunity to work in the community. And that means that we have to offer funding as well. So that's law. Under WIOA. It also requires vocational rehabilitation to partner directly with schools. Now, many of them already were. And if you don't know about if your sibling is connected to a DVR or voc rehab counselor, make sure that they are. Most school districts now have liaisons with voc rehab. And so they now have to spend 15% of their entire budget on youth in school. This is huge. This is money that wasn't there before. It's really focused on what they call is pre-employment transition services. So now the schools are required to work together with voc rehab. They did already, but now it's like mandates, and voc rehab has to report to the feds on how well are you doing with your pre-ets, and are you spending your 15%. Part of WIOA also is that your independent living centers, which typically has been more for people with physical disabilities, and they do advocacy, they're requiring that they provide support for youth as well. So that's a new category of people. Again, some already maybe have, and you got to find out in your local area who the independent living centers, where they're located. I have a resource at the end of this. And so really it's just focusing on more of that self-advocacy. Who am I? What is my disability? What are my barriers, but what are my gifts, and what can I do? And how can I be part of my community? And then the job centers, the one-stop job centers under WIOA, they also are by law mandated to offer resources now for young adults and for people with disabilities. Again, some were, but if they did not accommodate the needs of people with disabilities, now by law, they have to. If you're interested, look up WIOA. It's fascinating, and it's really awesome how the feds just kind of pulled things together, both with HCBS, that home and community-based services, and WIOA to really build on employment and living. All right, so pre-employment transition services is what really is focused for students. So it talks about job and career exploration, and I wrote a curriculum, so that's why that's up there under attainment. It's on workplace readiness, so we want people to explore types of jobs they might be able to do. Under pre-eds, voc rehab is working with the schools to make sure that students are getting this experience. Workplace readiness, those are all those soft skills we talked about: hygiene, cooking, budgeting, just being prepared to work. And then we have post-secondary education is the purple underneath. And that's really looking at what might you think about for additional training and education once the student leaves school. And then also some training maybe they could get. And then that self-advocacy, how can you how can I advocate for myself? What is my disability and what accommodations might I need for work or for additional education? And then the work-based learning, all VR, is really focused on how do we get students out working and get those work experiences. And I'm going to show you some examples. But state laws also are in principles. Some are just laws, some are principles. So look at your own state. And employment first. APSE is one of the bigger organizations in the country on employment first for all. So employment first prioritizes that. Remember, we saw the sheltered workshops or community rehab programs. They have different titles, but that is a facility where people go to. This is that we want to prioritize systems change, that everybody would have opportunities to be out in their communities and have an opportunity to work in community integrated employment. So the employment first, most states in the United States have made a commitment to funding employment first. Our Medicaid waiver, I talked about that, HCBS, Home and Community-Based Services. By 2023, there has to be a plan. Every state has to have a plan on how they're going to make changes, systems change, to really help people be part of their community, whether they're in day programs or rehab centers or facility-based pre-voc. The idea is, let's have people be in their own homes, out in jobs in the community. And apparently there's always been huge waiting lists. Some states barely match Medicaid funds with the feds. The feds give money. And then state of Wisconsin's one of them that does not always match fully. And so they're doing some legislation now to eliminate waiting lists. Now, I didn't see it. I just happened to see this. And so I wanted to put it in there. Very exciting ways to look at, some people may have to wait 10 years before they can get support services. And now a new one is called Technology First. So they're thinking about, how do we promote a person's ability to be more independent? And this has been in the elder population, senior supports, as finding ways that they can be more independent. And so now we're looking at people with disabilities. What kind of technology can we support people in their homes or in their jobs? So Social Security, woo, there's all sorts. SSI, Supplemental Security Income, they get Medicaid, it's a certain amount. Sometimes states add on a little bit more. They can't save more than $2,000 in their checking account at any time. It keeps people in poverty, and it's meant for people in poverty. And when you start earning money, your check goes down. Okay, but just remember in SSI, think about this. You can still earn quite a bit of money. You're not going to get any more cash benefits, but you can earn your own money and still keep Medicaid. That's really the big thing, because Medicaid provides your health care, your medications, your counseling, and then of course your services if you're getting in any employment or residential services. SSDI is another program that's based on maybe your parents, you're getting Social Security disability. So that might be from your parents, so it can be different amounts for every person. Eventually people might be getting it from their own earnings. You have to have so many quarters in, and that also includes Medicaid. Earnings won't impact it until you hit a certain high amount. I think it's around $1,100 a month, but hey, you can earn $1,100 a month. So this is what we always think about. At least earn that amount, and that gets you out working in the community. Then you can make a decision whether you want to move over and get off benefits. Able accounts. Thank goodness they just created these. This, you can now have family and grandparents. Before, if they gave you money, see that $2,000 savings, that's all you get. They said, oh, we want to give them $10,000. No, they're going to lose their Social Security and their Medicaid and all their services. So don't. So now we have these able accounts. They can be set up for the person, and then parents and grandparents and whoever wants to give money in there, those dollars have to be spent for any kind of disability related expenses, but they can have up to $100,000 in there. This is just fantastic. And even more, which would impact your Social Security. But it really is a wonderful opportunity for people to have money saved for if it's looking for a vehicle or purchasing a condo or a home. And then there are work incentives. Now they're pretty lame, I have to be honest. Social Security really is in desperate need to update. So there are some ways, past plans, ticket to work. There are some things that people, especially people with physical disabilities, look at some of these work incentives and then can get on some of these programs. Another whole training on that. And here is websites for you. The Red Book is really how you learn about some of those work incentives that can help you reduce the income that's counted. And when people are students, their income is not counted until up to a certain amount. And it's like I say, another whole training. But here is this is my passion, is employment supports. So we really want you to know that in transition, getting connected to vocational rehabilitation. But remember, voc rehab is short-term. They're only meant to come in, do that supports. Let's get this person into some, find out what they can do. Maybe they need some education. Maybe they go to a technical college or a 4-year degree. They can help cover some of those expenses. They can do on-the-job training expenses, apprenticeships, job shadowing. They help with all of this, maybe part of Project Search. So voc rehab is a great resource. Get connected, but it is short-term. Schools transition programs should be teaching soft skill training, work experiences. Some schools have an 18 to 21-year-old programs. And this is where they do some simulated work, some work experiences in the school, then get them out in the community and get those skills used in jobs. All right, then maybe people might be eligible. They have to meet eligibility to get long-term support, which really is all about the level of disability. Every state handles this a little different, but once you turn 18, you have child Social Security and eligibility. At 18, you move into adult Social Security and eligibility. And it's a little tougher, at least in Wisconsin. You may have had Social Security and supports through Medicaid as a child, but once you turned 18, they just determined that your disability and skills were not enough to meet long-term supports. But that's where people get their residential supports, employment supports, assistive technology, job coaching. So getting into the long-term support system is helpful for people who need just a little, maybe just a little bit of support or lots of support. You might need attendant care if they're in a wheelchair. So one of the things we support people on is supported living. So this is really, again, teaching these skills, the cooking skills, teaching those supported living skills. And supported living can be in condos, apartments, homes. This is really talking about people living in their own home. That's not group homes. Group homes are not owned by the people living in them. So a group home would not be they're living there. I guess it'd be like an apartment, but the idea is that supported living is really saying, we want to just come in and provide the support you need, only what you need. So if there may be 8 people in a group home, maybe 2 people need a lot of support. So there's staff there, but maybe the other 5 people don't need that level, or 6 people don't need that level of support. So supported living, the concept here is do what we need, come in, maybe live in, maybe remote monitoring. There's a lot of technology around supported living. And then really learning how to manage your home and how to be safe in your home. And then really connecting to your community. How do you make those medical connections? Now, maybe calling on the phone and setting things up, but I don't do that anymore. I make my appointments on my computer through my chart. So thinking about what that might look like. Do you need somebody who has medical power of attorney? How are they going to get to and from medical appointments or any appointments? What is their access to the community? And how do you really promote that access? Because I want that community to know that it is diverse. There is many people that live there with and without disabilities. And then we want to make sure people know how to access and use transportation. Do you have public transportation in your community? If you don't, because some people don't, are there some cell phone apps that a person can learn? How else do people get around in that community? Maybe there's already some places where there's ride shares. And then does the person know how to safely cross the streets? Do they know how to wait for a ride? These are really critical skills. So here's a couple community apps. There is apps now, and really we're talking about technology first and the importance of people to have a phone, a cell phone, especially if they're young, really looking at how they access their community. How does other young people access the community? Through their phones. So how can we really build that? These were just some, I make no money off of these. These were just some that were recommended to me as good apps on really building a connection to the community, learning how to access that community. Because in the end, this is what we want. We want this meaningful day, whatever that is for that person. What is their day? What is meaningful to them? And I really think that some type of time in jobs really is beneficial. So here's some resources I wanted to give you. Here's like the Centers for Independent Living, our WIA plans. What are some, number 6 is actually shows samples of students with more significant disabilities working on the job. And I love that I show this often to parents, and because I feel like sometimes it's, well, that's my son or daughter can't live in their own apartment. My son or daughter can't work in a job. Yes, they can. And here's some examples. And yes, let's figure out then, what are the barriers? Let's talk about what those barriers are. How do we go over those barriers? And then here's some more resources that are some free resources that Explore Work is just a free resource that students can get on. And then that really talks them through those 5 pre-ETS areas. Skills to Pay the Bills is a free curriculum. And then workplace accommodations, there's a free resource for employers. Assistive technology loan libraries, find out where they are in your state, free. Here's preparing for your IEP meeting. Here's a free curriculum on working people through the students through their IEP process. And then, of course, that self-advocacy. So I want to make sure you had all of these. And of course, I could speak about every single one of these topics for a whole hour. But I knew that you had, if you have questions, and I knew you guys wanted time to have a conversation. So that's who I am. But you can, I'll send you the PowerPoint. So then you can, actually what I'll do is I'll put it in a Google Doc probably, or a Google folder. So then you guys can just pull out the PowerPoint, and then you can see what these links are to help you. So there is my top 10 list in half an hour.